Today's open, man, I don't want to do this that much, so maybe I'm going to go a little quicker again. But Kyrie Irving picked up his option for $37 million and staying with the Brooklyn Nets. The deadline was tomorrow. The Nets found out when we did, which is always a good feeling. And I want to kind of go back over some of the clues. And what I always try to do when either, I'm armed with a little bit of information or zero information, but I always feel like there are little clues along the way. So we had the Shams Monday news drop of the previous week that Kyrie had interest from three other teams in a sign and trade: Lakers, Knicks, and Clippers. I thought that was maybe a little aggressive, that there was all that kind of interest. And then ultimately it's like, yeah, sure, the Lakers would trade Russell Westbrook for Kyrie Irving. Because even if you think Westbrook at his worst wants to get out there and play in games, from a basketball fit, Kyrie's a much better basketball fit because Westbrook's one of the worst off the ball, like high usage players. A guy that plays a lot, has a certain stature in the league. Off the ball, he's probably the worst that I've ever seen. So from a basketball standpoint, it made sense, even if, Kyrie, as we've said a million times, the pursuit of him. Did you ever have anybody in the room that goes, wait, what are we doing? Are we sure that we want to do this? So before Kyrie had picked up the option yesterday, 1 week later, Jake Fisher had Bleacher Report had this story going around that Kyrie was willing to decline the $37 million option and play at the $6 million tax exemption for the Lakers. Now, when I saw that, I know my rule on this. There's no way I would have ever believed that if it was any other single player in basketball. But with Kyrie, you never quite know. So I allowed myself to go, well, I will not allow myself to be surprised by this, despite the fact that if anybody else did it, I'd be like, no way. I'd read the article and immediately dismiss it. And then I thought, okay, well, what if he doesn't decline the option and picks it up? What does that mean about this story? Like, was this back-to-back Mondays where we had information being given to, people who are in the information sharing business? It's how they're paying the bills and putting food on the table, which I totally understand. But when you report that, do you feel like I had this information correct? Or was somebody trying to use me a week later, trying to create a whole nother leverage story to get the Nets to do something that they don't want to do? And whatever it was, the Nets stared down 2 different days of information that ended up probably not being all that accurate. Because then why did Kyrie, if Kyrie was thinking about it, was it just as simple as like, hey, I may be different. I'm not that different. Although he did tweet out stuff. He had some social media stuff that was just, man, he had something like, yeah, doing the path that's different isn't for everybody. But like, no, I actually think it's pretty normal to opt into $37 million when you have 1 year left on it. And when that story got out, like I said, the Nets found out about it on social media, just like the rest of us did. There was some interesting wording that Kyrie would now, quote, fulfill his 4-year commitment to the Nets and Kevin Durant. But here's the other part of this. Do we know? Is there any part of this story where we find out that this completely changes again? I'm open to anything. I'm open to all possibilities when it comes to this. And even if he does pick up the option, which is reported yesterday, and Kyrie is coming back to the Nets, there's still a lot of time before the start of the season, right? So I don't know what any of this means. I don't know what it means for Kevin Durant, where all of a sudden there was these weird Phoenix rumors that were picking up a bunch of steam yesterday. And again, I don't know if that's just stuff that was shared from somebody. Because like, here's a really good lesson in information being shared. When I was at the NBA Combine in Chicago, right, week of the lottery, I do the lottery show with Bill and Kevin and everybody. And then you show up to Chicago and you're bullshitting with all the other people who do this for a living. This is their job. They work in the NBA. And this isn't just thousands and thousands of fans. This is a select number of maybe a couple hundred people that are in this gymnasium watching these combine. And everybody was like, it's Jabari Smith to Orlando Magic. And I normally would go, oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess so. And then it was like, no, it's done. It's done deal. Jabari Smith. I'm like, all right. Okay. And that's what everybody kept saying. Hey, word, any other piece of information that I would read would be like word from the combine, Orlando Magic's already zeroed in on Jabari Smith. Jabari Smith's their guy. All these different reasons. But I'll always kind of wonder, like, is anyone saying anything specific about why it's Jabari Smith? This thing that's just accepted as true 6 weeks out from when the decision actually has to be made. And also kind of going back to like how information moves and how it works. Like, do we know that this is true, or do we just think it's a room of 200 people that are all repeating everybody else? Because I never heard anything specific. I'd be like, well, what do you think specifically about that? Be like, like, it's kind of what everybody's saying. And then guess what? It wasn't. I think Jabari was third, by the way, in that race for the number one pick. So everyone just kept repeating everybody else and nobody really knew. So it's always, I think that should be a good reminder not to go around being like everybody's wrong about everything all the time, because that's not. And I'm not even saying the true reporters here are necessarily wrong. I just think that there were stories that were dropped in back-to-back weeks that were kind of thrown out there to see if any leverage could be created. And apparently the Nets didn't want to give into this, even though I don't know, as Windhorst was saying yesterday, do we ever think that this Kyrie story is necessarily done? I can't imagine where Katie's head is at with all this. I would love to know what those conversations are like between the two of them. But I always kind of land on this one with Kyrie is that after I listened to the Kevin Durant podcast where Durant wasn't on it, but it was Kyrie for like 30 minutes. And I did mention this once before. Like I went and listened to it, I thought, let me listen to this and just see if there's something that I just don't understand. And I think the thing I didn't understand is I think Kyrie loves the attention of how it's like all these people are out to get him. And I don't think people are actually out to get him. I just think they think he's awesome at basketball and wish he played more. And his opinions on things are just fucking weird, man. So I think it's pretty simple. Like he even had a thing where he went back at Barstool that made zero sense. Barstool showed the Joker meme, the hospital's blowing up behind him, and they were like Kyrie Irving leaving every franchise he's ever been with, right? I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's general. And Kyrie responded to it. It was like NBA champion and gold medalist Kyrie Irving. And it's like, wait a minute, which part are you correcting? The first part, but not the second part? And then he did what is very classic, and it happens a lot when people are sort of in arguments in the public figure space where it's like, you continue to make money off of me, my name, and in the backs of others. I've had that thrown at me a lot over the years. Well, if it weren't for basketball, you know how I feel about that? If it weren't for basketball, I'd do something else and be successful. I'm not trying to be insensitive about it, but this idea, like I wouldn't be under a bridge wondering where it all went wrong if there was zero basketball. I'd figure something else out. So yes, I get paid talking about athletes all the time, but I think it's one of the most insulting things you can say to somebody that makes money in a certain business, where it's like, if it weren't for this, what? Then I would do something else. I would get a different job, because that's how life fucking works. All right, John Wall, Clippers. If this goes through, I like it. And here's what's crazy about that. He's in the past 5 years missed 41, 50, 82, 32, and 82 games. So that's 287 games. Looks like he could have played last year. Looked like Houston wasn't interested. That buyout number kind of came in where I thought it would be. We referenced it on Sunday. So if he makes up the $7 million that he's not going to get paid, he was at $47 million. Looks like the buyouts, if we think that's true, around $40 million. And even him missing all of those games, 31, 32, I think, before the season starts this year, I kind of like it for the Clippers. I would take a chance on it. You're going to spend $7 million way worse with different players. And I always feel like, as bad as Wall's rep is, there were some really high level moments. Unfortunately, they're probably like 5 years ago. I do think of that 2017. He was flirting with like being a really special player in this league, and it has not worked out. Multiple injuries, and then just a Houston franchise that wasn't even interested in having him out there. Clearly, there was no trade market for him. The expiring contract is too much, because you would have to, what contract would be out there? You'd be like, all right, I'll take on Wall for 47. We're taking the entire year off. We have multiple contracts with multiple years. I mean, it just, it didn't make a ton of sense. But for the Clippers on the 1 year, see how it goes. Very limited money. Houston's paying most of the tab. If that ends up happening, I think it's a great move.